Blessings, everyone. This is Reverend Afrin with the Four Pillars Proto-Temple. I'm out on a hike today, and so forgive me if you can hear the crunching of my boots in the leaves, and also forgive my shortness of breath if I happen to be hiking up a hill at the time. So I'm coming to you today because I want to talk about initiation. I want to talk about what exactly initiation is. I want to talk about how it works. I want to talk about what it means. There are many different types of initiation. We have, initiation of our lives, of course, at birth, when we're initiated into the living community. Our jobs have initiation too, when you complete your 90 days and you become a fully fledged member of the staff or, what have you. We also have initiation into adulthood. For us in modern society, that means graduating high school. Many of us at the age of 18, sometimes 17, I was 17 when I graduated, are initiated into the working class by our graduation into from high school. In Germany, when you graduate high school, you receive your diploma, like in every other country. But in Germany, they call it an Arbeitur. That means essentially a right to work. So when you graduate from high school, you get that permission to be able to work as a majority individual. So what exactly does that mean? That means that you've passed the test, as it were. And after passing the test, you're given the permission to do whatever it is that you're initiated to do. Being given a licensure or a certification to do a certain job, that could be a form of initiation. We talk from a religious perspective, and many people are initiated in many different ways. For instance, in Buddhism, when you are initiated into being a Buddhist as a lay practitioner, you will have to take what's called the 5 precepts, or the 5 lay precepts. In some sects of Buddhism, you may also have to take refuge. It's called taking refuge. Essentially, you would declare yourself to be a Buddhist, and you would declare that you were taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You would also take the 5 lay precepts, not harming, not stealing, not lying, not creating sexual misconduct, and so forth. In Islam, for instance, you have to declare yourself a Muslim by repeating the Muslim declaration of faith, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasul, which means there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the Prophet. And you have to repeat that 3 times in order to be declared a Muslim. In Judaism, you repeat the Shema. You make a public declaration in front of the entire temple, and you tell them that you are agreeing to be Jewish and a follower of Judaism by the recitation of the Shema. Most of us know in Christianity that you must be baptized, and that's kind of your initiation into Christianity. So there are many different forms of initiation. However, most of the forms of initiation have the same core elements. These elements include normally some sort of a call. Then the person being initiated gives a response. After that, there's normally some form of an ordeal or a test that needs to be surpassed. And once the person passes that ordeal, then they receive the initiation. Sometimes an initiation is initiating you into a certain path. Sometimes it's a recognition of what's already there, or a recognition of the work that you've already done. For instance, in some forms of Buddhism, when you perform these initiations, you're simply recognizing what you already had. You're recognizing your Buddhahood. You're recognizing that which has already been inside of you. And you're making a commitment to continue to practice with that. An initiation also involves generally a vow or an oath. Again, going back to Buddhism because I've studied so much of it. In Buddhism, you find that you take a vow. For instance, if you're practicing Mahayana Buddhism, then you would take the Bodhisattva vow, which essentially means that you're vowing your existence, your life, to helping other beings be free of suffering. So you take this vow, and it's not a promise by any means, it's a vow. It's something that you, under any circumstances of your life, are going to do. To say it's an obligation is not completely true, because normally obligations are things which are placed upon us from someone else or from some outside source. A vow is something that you choose to do, an obligation that you choose to have and to make for yourself, and something that you're never going to break. In other organizations and other faiths, you take an oath. An oath is very similar to a vow. You take the oath to behave this way, to do this, to do that, etc., etc. Now that we've talked about initiation in other forms, let's talk about initiation in Wicca specifically. We have similar elements to our initiations. Firstly, there's a call, there's an answer, there's an ordeal, there is an oath, and then you're fully initiated. Now, initiations, as I said, are sort of a commencement, allowing you to move into a certain group of people or participate in a certain thing. It's also a recognition, but it's also a transmission. We don't really speak much of transmission in the West, but in the East they speak very much of transmission. They normally refer to it as Dharma transmission. Essentially, it's mind-to-mind transmission, where you, having worked with a teacher, will receive transmission from that teacher. And it's a spiritual experience where the teacher opens their mind, you open your mind, you connect on a spiritual level, and knowledge and information is downloaded from your teacher's brain into yours, their spirit into your spirit. So it is a very spiritual experience. In Wicca, we have all of that. The process of initiation is something that's not taken very lightly. It's something that's very important, something that means a great deal, and it's also something that is transformative. So you're not simply going through the motions and doing whatever it is that you do. It's a transformative experience that requires much of the person who's undergoing that. In the Correllian tradition, we believe that we receive our legitimacy from the ancestors, from our relationship with the ancestors. Our relationship with the other world and with the ancestors gives us the ability to be able to initiate, gives us the ability to be able to receive messages from the divine and from the ancestors. But that relationship is very important. As a whole, the tradition works to maintain that relationship, and as individuals, especially individual members of the high priesthood, it is our requirement that we continue to work with that relationship with the divine and with the ancestors as a way to be able to perform and facilitate the things that we need to do. So when we are initiating someone, that person, we, as the facilitators, are acting in some ways like conduits for that divine energy. And there is something very real, very physical, and very spiritual that happens to the initiate when they go through the process. Any of you that have ever been initiated will understand that initiations are secret. They're not meant to be shared for many reasons, but only those who have been initiated into that degree are allowed to know what that initiation is. And for those that aren't, it's a secret, and it should stay that way for many reasons, as I said. Often, you can find initiations and ritual initiations or examples, of initiations from other traditions. Gardnerian tradition, Gerald Gardner's Book of Shadows has been published at this point, so it's fairly easy to find that information and be able to read up on it. And there is something very much to be said for all of the things that are practiced in the Gardnerian initiation. I can say, though, that there are differences between Gardnerian initiation and other traditions, or even Correllian initiation. So when you receive an initiation, you are empowered to perform the work of the rank that you've attained. You're given permission from a social perspective, given permission by the majority to practice and to participate in the practices of that rank. From a spiritual perspective, you've been empowered by the divine, by the ancestors, to be able to perform that work. And from a psycho-spiritual perspective, you go through some significant psychological changes as well. So it's very important. I don't think that people should take initiation lightly. I know those that facilitate initiation do not take it lightly. It is not just going through the motions. It is not just saying the words. There is very real power and very real change that happens. It makes me think a little bit of the initiations that one undergoes when practicing Reiki. And in Reiki, as I understand it, I'm not a Reiki practitioner, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the aura and the energy of the practitioner is changed, is impacted, is augmented with Reiki symbols and Reiki energy from higher level practitioners, which then changes and shifts the energies of that initiate, allowing them to perform the work. I often think about other initiation rituals that are performed in many cultures all over the world, in particular native cultures and shamanic cultures. For those who may have attained the second degree and who have read the text or taken the course on the comparative religions from Witch School, will remember about the shamans and the story that these particular shamans go through quite an ordeal in order to be a shaman. Frequently, these shaman will be stricken by an illness, and they will become very ill and potentially even die. Those that do not die, if they happen to see a particular spirit at their deathbed and then get better, they are believed to be now chosen by this spirit to be a shaman of that spirit. That's a life and death ordeal. You almost have to die in order to be a shaman. The path of the shaman is one that is very difficult because of these deeply transformative procedures that have to take place before you can be a shaman. It also reminds me of stories from early Paleolithic peoples. For those who are fans of history will know of the caves in France that have some of the oldest and most preserved examples of cave paintings. These caves were used for initiations, for young adolescent men being initiated into manhood. They would bring them down into the caves. They would turn, well, not really turn because they didn't have electricity, but they would extinguish the flames, the lights in the cave, and the men of the tribe would beat the boys within an inch of their lives. The boys would come out of the cave completely changed. They were being attacked in the dark by people bigger and stronger than them, and they had to defend themselves. The ones that survived, which I don't think they would kill them really on purpose because they were their progeny and they kind of needed them for the procreation of the tribe, but they would come out of the cave traumatized essentially. And that trauma, in many ways, initiated them into manhood because they knew what it was like to be almost dead. They didn't fear death anymore, and they were able to be men and act in the best interests of the tribe and of the majority with no fear of themselves, of their own mortality. And I see a lot of that too in modern society. People that have had very traumatic experiences in their lives, and they say, oh, well, they grew up too fast. Oh, they had to grow up fast because, their parents X, Y, and Z, so they had to be the parent. But in some ways, they were initiated into adulthood very early and through trauma. And certainly that's something that their therapist will need to work out with them later in their life. But suffice to say that in many ways, that's also an initiation. And for those of us that have been blessed to not have to go through those traumatic experiences, might not necessarily fully understand what that's like. One of my co-workers is a practicing psychic and Reiki practitioner. She does tarot readings as well as Reiki. And although we haven't really spoken too much about it, she has had some experiences in her life and that have caused her in some ways to be more spiritual and to be more receptive to psychic impulses. And I'm finding more and more that many of these people that are very good psychics and very good spiritualists have had levels of trauma. At any rate, that tangent. So suffice to say that initiation is something that is very transformative. So for those of us that go for our initiations, continue to be mindful of what it is that you're actually doing. A lot of times, as I said, there's a call. You're being asked, you're being either called to action or asked if this is something that you really want to do and you're very sure about doing. Because once you're initiated, you can't really go back. Now, although the group or the organization may not recognize your initiation any longer, but that still doesn't mean that that doesn't change the fact that there were some changes that were done within you. For those of us who have read books on Wicca or have been practicing for a long time, you'll probably remember many, many early books on Wicca that reminded us that, degrees and titles and certifications mean nothing unless you have that personal connection with the divine. But at the same time, once you get that personal connection with the divine, then those degrees and everything else in some ways still don't mean anything, because you've created that relationship and you already have that relationship. But for some of us, and I'm willing to bet most of us, those experiences that we have through initiation that are very transformative are the catalysts that we need to be able to continue to have that relationship with the divine or to further build that relationship with the divine. So I encourage everyone to really think about what they're doing. If this is something that they really want to do, then you need to pursue it wholeheartedly. And once you pursue it wholeheartedly, then you need to make sure that you search and seek out someone that you trust and someone that you respect to be able to help you to go through your initiation in a effective and transformative way. Some faiths are so focused on initiation that if you haven't been initiated or you cannot trace your lineage through a particular person, then your lineage and your initiation is illegitimate and you don't have the right to call yourself whatever that is. So I just ask that for those of us that are participating in initiation or going through the transformative experience, realize it for what it is, and also make sure that the person to whom you are speaking to is legitimate and you can trace your initiation and your lineage in the proper ways as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this little lecture by me. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please, of course, don't hesitate to comment. Until next time, signing off for now.